And hello, everyone. We have a fantastic authors roundtable for you here. I am joined by Robb Grindstaff. Robb, say hello to everybody.
Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at.
Thank you, Robb. And I have EC Stilson. EC, say hello to everyone.
Hello.
All right. These are two of the best in the business. These are professional authors, everybody. I am a writer myself. I am also professional, but I have never gotten something published quite like that. We'll start with Robb. Robb, in addition to being a career journalist and editor and newspaper publisher and media executive, Robb has written fiction most of his life. The newspaper biz has taken him and his family from Phoenix, Arizona to small towns in North Carolina and Texas, and from 7 years in Washington, D.C. to 5 years in Asia. So he is well-traveled, and that definitely comes out in his work. Born and raised in a small-town kid, he is as comfortable in Tokyo or Tuna, Texas. He now lives at a lake in Missouri where he writes and edits full-time. He's had a dozen or more short stories published in several print anthologies and e-zines, and several published articles on the craft of writing fiction. He's taught courses for U.S. and Australian writer organizations. He has 3 novels and a collection of short stories through Evolve Publishing, with the 4th novel, Turning Trixie, scheduled for release in late 2022. Again, that's Turning Trixie. Robb also edits fiction, nonfiction books for authors from around the world. And then we have Elisa. She goes by her pen name, E.C. Stilson. And she has authored over 10 novels, novellas, and children's picture books. 2 of her memoirs, The Golden Sky and Homeless in Hawaii, have become #1 bestsellers on Amazon for women's memoirs. Since 2011, through fundraisers, book donations, and radio interviews, E.C. Stilson has helped raise thousands of dollars for organizations such as Angel Watch, Porniff Medical Center, the Pregnancy Resource Center, the American Diabetes Association, and Primary Children's Hospital. While she's not working as a copy editor, she's parenting, fiddling, writing, or speaking at events for infant loss support groups or cancer awareness organizations. Both of you, thank you so much for joining me here today. I got a lot of questions for both of you. And we will, if you've got any questions and you are listening right now, questions or comments, please feel free to comment. There is a bit of a giveaway here for those who decide to participate. So if you want access to some of these books, I have read both of them that we're going to talk about today. Robb, let's start with a question for you here. Give me a brief synopsis. Your new book this month is called Slade. What is Slade all about?
And first of all, thanks, Odie, for having us on here. Appreciate it very much. And Elisa, always good to see you.
You too.
The short version of Slade is that, find my notes here so I remember what that book is about that I wrote. But Slade is Slade Bennington, and 30 years before the book starts, he was in a severe auto accident. Disabled, disfigured, winds up writing a book about overcoming trauma that becomes a bestseller, that becomes a box office smash movie, and he marries the lead actress from the movie. From there, he writes a self-help book, and with his wife's connections to Hollywood, he becomes the spiritual counselor to the stars, the shaman to the stars, and which kind of spawns a cult, a celebrity cult that he wants nothing to do with. He just wants to, stay home and raise his kids. And that's, pretty much it. Of course, there's always, when you have somebody in that situation, there's always somebody that doesn't like you and might want to take revenge.
Delicious intrigue there. Elisa, let's give the same question to you. What is 2 More Years about? Just a brief synopsis.
It's basically just about my journey with cancer, some of the miracles along the way that have kept me strong. So I'm still battling cancer. And like you said before this started, spoiler alert, I'm still alive. But initially diagnosed in 2020, the doctors gave me 2 more years to live. And Robb actually is the amazing editor for my book, and he helped come up with the title. And yep, that's what my book's about.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. We're glad to have you here. All right, so I want to go back and forth with you both here on your novels. I want to kind of rotate, author information and what your book is about here. So Rob, what is your usual creative process? What's a day like in the head of Robb Grindstaff?
Oh, you really don't want to go there. That's scary in there.
Whoops.
Yeah, no, it's, I think every writer has their own individual process, but there's always some similarities as well. With me, what usually happens is a fictional character shows up in my head and won't shut up until I sit down and start writing their story. And I don't even know what the story is about until they tell. And then sometimes it works as a story, sometimes it doesn't, but that's kind of how the process starts. Now, how it usually early morning or later in the evening is when I spend time writing. And so I've got most of the day in between to do something else, which used to be a day job. Now I'm writing and editing full time. But the process, once you get it all on paper, what you've got is a giant lump of clay that you have to keep refining and get, some trusted readers to, like Elisa was one of the test readers or beta readers for Slade, to come and tell you if you've got an idea that's going to work or not.
Awesome. Elisa, we'll go to you. So you wrote this while you had cancer. I'm familiar with the writing process enough and know that I'm barely making it as is. How difficult was it to get anything done, especially a novel, when you're going through all this?
Well, I've had days where it's been really hard to, I had this massive back surgery. They had to remove a really big tumor. They actually took out an entire vertebrae. And so I've had a lot of time where I couldn't really walk, and it was a really big struggle. But then I would just sit in bed, and almost all of my memoir was written on my phone. And sometimes I would just talk to text, and really it's like free counseling. So I feel like everybody on Facebook, they've been psychologists for me. But that was the writing process for me, just kind of getting my feelings and experiences out and then just posting it to Facebook. And I ended up pulling everything off of there. And then just Robb was really instrumental in helping me with editing it. Because I honestly, when Evolved picked it up, I just kind of felt like I was to the point where I couldn't do a lot more. I was just so tired. But he just really polished it and made it shine. So.
Awesome. Cheryl, fan of yours. I followed her on Facebook. She's touched everyone who's known her. Can't wait for her book. Again, that is 2 more years. It is, having got a peek at it myself, I actually did finish it. It is, it's sometimes inspirational. It's sometimes you got to wait for that inspiration. There are certainly moments of, you get all the ups and downs in it. That's for sure. Robb, so your background's in newspaper journalism. Somebody who started off reading Slade would probably be surprised by that because the style is very unorthodox. This is not like reading an average novel. How is writing newspaper journalism different than writing fiction?
Well, I'll use Slade's, a quote from Slade where he said, the difference between fiction and nonfiction is that fiction has to have some truth in it. So that's my sarcastic remark, but I'm quoting Slade, so don't blame me for that one. He said it, I didn't. But it's 2 completely different styles of writing. But on the other hand, journalism, when I went to journalism school, was hammered into us to write tight, to say things succinctly, to structure it so that each paragraph, this paragraph leads to the next one, and you keep giving more and more information as the story progresses. And there's a lot of lessons there for fiction writers. Sometimes when we write fiction, we like to get very flowery and descriptive and go off on long tangents, and sometimes that can lose the readers. So I think in my case anyway, that the journalism style of writing can work for for writing fiction or creative nonfiction like a memoir. Just succinct and to the point. Get the information out there. Don't overdo the writing. And I forgot who it is. There's a famous writer who said, if you're a writer and you write something and it sounds like writing, rewrite it. You don't want it to sound like writing. You want it to sound like, people talking, people thinking, and not overdo the prose to try to make it look or sound like you went to college or something.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I agree. It's something that's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be engaging, and I was very amazed by both of you how neither of you had walls of text that I'm used to getting, especially on social media. And I feel, hey, if I can keep my attention through a whole Facebook post, people have done a good job. But you're not challenging the readers. It's moment to moment, certainly for both of you here. You both have audience questions, and I'm going to get to those. We'll start with one for EC here. All right, you got a question from Julie. How did your writing help you cope in your daily life activities and all the ups and downs?
Oh, there were definitely some times where I really felt weak and just kind of needing to feel that validation that it's okay not to be strong all the time and to really just face what I'm going through. And so writing it was kind of neat just to see exactly what I was feeling and why, understanding more of that. But then also getting feedback from my friends on Facebook and my followers, just, that it's okay to be honest with myself and everything that I was going through, that is a good way to cope. I mean, just talking to people and realizing that you're not alone.
Well said. Well said. Rob, you have a question here from somebody you may know.
No, don't know her.
In a previous book, Carry Me Away, you also launched the story with a car accident, and now similar with Slade. What do you think inspired that?
I honestly don't know. I've never been in a serious car accident. Maybe it's one of those deep-seated psychological fears that I will be someday. But they're two very different books. But you're right; they both kind of launch with a major significant event. In this case, car accidents in both of those books that were written 15 years apart.
Sometimes you're just good at writing about something, and you've got your skills, and you've got what you're good at, and you certainly have that voice here. I'm going to ask a few from my list here, just because I like my questions best. I don't think that should be a surprise for anybody here. All right, so Lisa, you mentioned something in your book that I really enjoyed, because it's something that happened to me when I was dealing with grief. Now, obviously, I'm not going to put myself on your level and do that thing where I pretend that mine was anywhere close to yours. But where you started seeing symbols amidst the trauma, and you have one about a grasshopper that loses a leg. Do you find that have you always been prone to seeing symbols? Is that something that heightened for you also? Did you start seeing the world a lot differently since this whole journey started? I mean, obviously you see it differently in some ways, but especially when you start looking at the world and noticing the smaller things like, insects and whatnot. Did that start making you, I don't know, did you start becoming hyper aware of things?
Yeah, that definitely heightened for me. It just seems like those little signs, they kind of help you along your journey. I know that I really started noticing things like that, just realizing the total beauty in life actually when my son died. And I think one of the biggest things that I've ever seen that just absolutely amazed me. So we had lived in Utah, and I had this statue that looked just like my little boy who had passed away, and the statue actually broke. And I was just devastated because somehow it felt like if I had this statue, my little boy was still with me, but here it broke. We moved to Idaho. It couldn't move with us, And anyways, I had prayed for a sign that God would show me that we were supposed to be in Idaho. We were meant to be here. And we bought this house. I was walking up the road and I looked to my left and there was actually a statue, the same kind of statue, you guys. I mean, it's actually the same statue that I'd had, and it was sitting in one of our neighbors' yards. And I just couldn't believe that. It was kind of miraculous for me. It's the only other statue like that I've seen. And I don't know. Yeah, they kind of get you through. It's like this connection, this breadcrumb from God that he's watching out for us, and there is meaning, there is a reason.
Awesome. I'm awesome to hear it. It really is something that it's a perspective shifter, and it's something that you start finding little patterns everywhere. All right, back to you, Rob. So there's certain novels where the author puts themselves in the novel. The Once and Future King by White. You've got The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, and then you in Slade, who plays not a minor role, and I really enjoyed that. What was the thinking behind putting yourself in the novel, or somebody at least a lot like you who has your exact same name? What was the thinking behind that?
Again, it kind of evolved over the course of writing it, which the whole process, you talked about the process earlier. In this case, I had the character, but I didn't know the story. And so I put my journalism training to work and thought, oh, I'll interview the character and let him speak. And then that way the story will come out, and then I'll take all of that and turn it into a novel. But as it kept going, that's when I kind of started looking at all this of interviewing the characters and thinking this might actually work as a novel. It'll be very different than reading your standard novel. But the characters were always the interviewer, and then whatever character the interviewer was talking to. Well, I was the interviewer because I was interviewing the characters, and I had all the names for the characters, but I couldn't think of a name for the interviewer. And I thought about just calling him the interviewer and not putting a name on it. But I put my name in as a placeholder until I could figure out the name of the interviewer. And then it just stuck, and I decided just to leave it. And it felt like it added some realism to it if the interviewer is the same as the author. Because normally when you pick up a book, fiction book, a novel, and you see the author's name on the front cover. But when you start reading the first page, and immediately that's not the author talking, it's the character talking. So this kind of breaks that wall a little bit, and inserts me in there. And I always think of, in the movies, you see it with Alfred Hitchcock, always makes an appearance in his movies, or M. Night Shyamalan that will show up in his own movies, playing a minor role or a more medium to lead roles almost sometimes. And because I just never thought of another name for the interviewer character, I just decided to leave my name on there and see if that worked.
It does. Works for the novel. All right. So your book, Elisa, brings up so many balances. And I find that it's difficult for me personally to balance when is an appropriate time to let it all out, to when are you venting versus when you're just allowing yourself to spiral. Because I see a lot of people that kind of mismanage this, myself included, some days where you're like, oh, I'm venting, but you're actually getting worse and letting yourself sink deeper into it. And then there's the C.S. Lewis point of view, which is force yourself to smile, and before long the smile becomes natural, which is good to try and fight that sadness, but then all of a sudden you're masking something. You're actually not really being authentic. How do you find that balance between when you're venting and letting something out and when you're genuinely happy and you're not trying to suppress anything? Or, when do you fight? When do you vent, I guess is probably the best way to say it.
I think it's okay to admit that things are hard, but then, you can't wallow in it. And I do firmly believe that there's good in everything. And so for just as much bad I'm experiencing or the bad things that I see, I'm also trying to temper that with all of the good things. So it's like I was in the hospital after my first surgery. It was during the pandemic. Things were so hard. I could hardly see my family because I could only have one visitor, an adult visitor, for 1 to 2 hours a day. And I mean, that was so hard. Here they told me, I was going to die from this, and then I couldn't see my family. And so I'm trying to find the good in this. Well, the good in that specific situation was they let my husband bring my violin in. And so I was trying to think of a good way, something that I could do that would make this whole situation better. And for me, at that exact moment, it was to be able to play my violin for the other patients. And that's what I got to do. And so even though, I'm dying, I can still find something good to make my life matter and to have fun with life still. I think you can always find the good. And so I think that's what it is acknowledging that it's hard. Sometimes things are really rough, but then still having that strength and that perseverance to say, do you know what? I'm going to find joy in this no matter what, no matter how hard this is. I'm not going to let this situation get me down. My disease will not define me.
Awesome. Robb, you have a character in the book named Danielle, a psychologist. She kind of talks about the unintentional psychology of Slade. And I find this is very fascinating when you're scripting a character. We as human beings are always, everybody contradicts themselves. We all have like an idea of what we want to do, and we don't live up to that on the day-to-day. And you get a lot of that, not just with Slade, but with the characters around him, that they are trying to be something, as we all are from day to day, and we just happen to contradict ourselves sometimes. Now, there's this balance here as well, because if you have characters that contradict themselves all the time, they're no longer realistic. You're in like one of those cheesy horror movies where they're always making the wrong decisions and not true to any specific character. How do you kind of balance characters being true to themselves? Do you flesh them out psychologically and just kind of identify times when they would act irrationally or things that irritate them? I guess your process there as far as fleshing out characters.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to the process of, interviewing your characters to get to know them, which I've done that a lot. I would recommend it to other readers or other writers a lot, as not to write a book of interviews, but to interview your characters to get to know them, and ask questions that get to what their core beliefs are, what type of person they are, what they, how they act in different situations. And then you can find those spots where somebody acts slightly out of character, or disagrees with whatever their moral code or their psychological makeup is, but it's still within the normal range for what a person does. Because as you said, we don't always act exactly the same every day. We don't always live up to our own principles and beliefs. And sometimes you lose your temper or act irrationally when normally you try to be a very rational person. So it's got to be within the character's ability and not seem so out of character that the reader goes, well, why would this character do that? They wouldn't. So it's a balance. But yeah, as you say, they can't swing back and forth constantly and act in ways that just don't connect and make sense from one scene to the next. But if they always act one way and then, something happens that causes them to act out of their own normal character in a believable way. I think that makes for more believable characters because nobody acts exactly the same all the time.
It is. You end up making kind of a Borgs of people if they're too consistent, that there's just no, they become inhuman and they're not very readable. It's one of those things that I feel is for me, I'm a writer and not an author for this very reason. I get to have a brief snippet of time as opposed to these long moments. It's just so much to flesh out. It would take so much more time. And that's why it's so impressive that you do what you do. let's go back to Elisa here. So you share a lot of moments of now most of the callousness is unintentional, right? But moments from your family where there's just, as a reader, of course, I side with you because I'm walking your shoes. I can't believe they would say something like that, and of course they don't mean much by it. Or there's these moments at the same time of this unintentional sainthood, something very simple. They didn't do it to try and become a saint. There are these tender moments that are really they're very personal, very sensitive. How is it that you balance that, or I guess it's not even balance. How is it that you write about these kind of intensity, knowing that you're kind of opening a wound for the whole world to see and share in and kind of judge along, these family members and friends and close acquaintances of yours, and of course you want people along for the journey, but the way this is so unscripted almost, that you write the moments that most people would keep private. How is it that you do that, and what are kind of the challenges when you say this probably should or this probably should not be included?
Yeah, some of it can be really hard. Writing memoir is not easy. I really found that with my first book, The Golden Sky. And I think the thing that was so tough about that was it was actually my journal. So I wasn't just putting things on Facebook that I knew people would read. It was actually just writing in my journal about my son and everything that happened with his death. And sometimes people could be really, really cruel. I had people tell me that if I would have had more faith, my son would have been healed. I mean, just different things like this. But I've been very honest and amazed with how kind people have been, that even with that vulnerability, I think that they find a commonality in that this is what they felt, or things that they've experienced from family members or friends or acquaintances. But my brother calls them ticking time bombs, because sometimes I've written about people in my books and they haven't read the books, and then years later they will actually pick up the book and then send me a message and say, hey, I can't believe that you wrote this. And I won't even use their name, but they know, they remember the situation and what happened. But then it's been really kind of beautiful to see how we've kind of moved past things, or people have said they were so sorry that certain things happened. They've grown from the situation or grown up from years past. But I do kind of dread sometimes, people either know that they've been really amazing in my life and I've written these beautiful things about them, or if we've kind of had a hard situation, then they've read that too. And so it has been hard. I think the term ticking time bomb is really apt.
Yeah, I'm glad it's your life to manage. That's well, and I appreciate you sharing it. Like it's some I think I get the most out of these moments because people need to see them, and they're real, right? Like these aren't characters that are invented because they're fun. This is things that you do, and I think at various times you see myself, and I try to put myself in your shoes as as a reader, but then I see somebody else's point of view, and I'm like, oh man, they didn't mean it. They didn't mean that. Like, can they get a do over on this one? And along that same theme, Rob, I'm going to go back to you here. How you are? This is Slate is a very fun book to read. It's very entertaining, and that's it's gripping beginning to end. For me, it was a day, a reading session, and you're entertained by it. How much does storytelling interfere with the fun? How much are you writing for other people's entertainment, and how much are you writing for your own entertainment? Is there a balance there? Is there a, hey, I'm going to take today and do audience entertainment? Is there a, I'm going to take today and do my entertainment, or make them true to the characters? How does that work?
Well, starting with just storytelling, I was talking to somebody yesterday about the storytelling idea in general, and I firmly believe that how everybody has a story to tell, right? And everybody has a creative imagination, and everybody thinks about I should write this down, or somebody should write this down for me if they don't like writing. But I think storytelling is ingrained in the human psyche. It's evolutionary biology or creation or something. Everybody likes stories, and everybody from the earliest time. People have told stories one way or another. The cavemen sitting around the fire told stories about Grok and the mammoth he killed earlier that day with a spear. And that became the earliest entertainment, was sitting around at the end of the day telling stories about what had happened, and maybe embellishing those stories, and created the first fiction. And so may have gotten so far afield, I don't remember your question, but the storytelling process of, whether it's for my own entertainment or for someone else, I have to tell the story that I want to tell, and then I try to make sure or find out if it's something anybody else would be interested in as well. And if not, then that story may just wind up on a shelf inside my computer and never see the light of day. And that's where some trusted beta readers or test readers come in handy. Like Elisa and a handful of others that got to read a first draft of Slade, because it was so different. I had no idea if I should just throw it out or start over or rewrite it into a standard novel form until I got some feedback, which was, no, let's give this a try in this interview format. Other stories I've written, and sometimes I can finish it and go, well, I liked writing that, but yeah, I'm not releasing that into the wild. Nobody ever needs to see that. It's just not a good story, or whatever the case might be. So I think if there's a book out there that has never been written that you wish somebody would write, then it's your job to write it. And that's kind of how I look at it. We'll see if readers respond to it, but I have to write what I have to write, and then I try to make sure it's going to be of interest to somebody besides just me. Otherwise, I'm telling a story in a cave and there's nobody else in the cave.
Right, writing with no audience, just doing it for yourself, which has its moments. But obviously, if you're going to publish as you have and have it be successful, then probably want to keep in mind that there's somebody on the other end you're speaking to. All right, I asked my questions. All right, audience, I know you love your questions the most, so I'll get to yours. I appreciate you indulging me there. This one's from Julie for you, Elisa. Have you ever thought about writing another person's story, since you've been writing memoirs with maybe something that's familiar to you, with a life of sickness that is incurable, or maybe something completely the opposite, depending on why you would write another story. So take that one for us.
Yeah, so I've had a few people actually reach out to me and ask if I would ghostwrite their stories, and that's been hard for me, because I would have to be so passionate and also have to really understand what they're going through. But one of the people who I've seriously considered this for, she hasn't asked me, but my Aunt Jackie. She just tells the most hilarious stories. She is so funny, and she's also endured a lot of hardships. But I just don't know if I could fully embody or do justice to her story. And I've actually just been encouraging her to write everything she's been through. But yeah, so I thought about that with her, but I think it would be really difficult. They always say, write what you know, and it's so hard to get in somebody else's head and know exactly what they're going through.
Yeah, I appreciate that honesty. There are some things that I just straight up can't write, and I will have to admit that, because me trying to write it, believe me, it's painful. It's probably something you can craft or workshop a bit, but when you have a story as strong as yours, asking to go outside the wheelhouse, it's like asking Babe Ruth to knit instead of hit home runs. You're like, well, it's perhaps possible, but I don't know if that's what we want to do here. Yeah, let him do what he's made to do here. Let Elisa do what she's made to do. Not that she doesn't appreciate the questions, I'm sure, or that at least the inquiries. I'm sure it's an honor. But all right, Rob. So most people write what we know. In the case of Elisa, we got a lot about what she knows. You're writing about something that I'm at least hoping you don't know, as far as leading a cult and and getting involved in some of these unsavory connections.
I keep trying.
Right,
Nobody
it's
follows me.
happening with every time you go up the charts. It keeps happening. But what inspired you what inspired this story of Slade and the cast?
In this particular case, and it seems like every story maybe comes across a different way to start with, but this one was a little different for me. I'm the guy that I can lay down and fall asleep within 5 minutes, sometimes within 2 minutes or less, just about any time. I don't even have to be sleepy. If I lay down, I will probably fall asleep. Until one night, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm still laying there, and all I can think about is, and hear in my head is the Slade character talking. And so I finally just got up and started writing down notes about what was going through my mind. It just, the brain wouldn't turn off. But like I said earlier, I didn't even know what the story was until I, jotted all my notes down, tried to figure something out, and then decided to interview the characters to see if a story showed up or not. And eventually it did. So there wasn't anything that I'm aware of that spurred it. Sometimes maybe the underlying themes kind of reveal themselves gradually. The cult of celebrity, the cults sometimes are almost worship of self-help books. I mean, the best-selling books on Amazon on any given day are, all books about how you can improve your life by buying my book, for $29.95. And some of these, the self-help gurus that are out there, and some of them have, wonderful things to say. But then they'll generate a following of people who are just dedicated to them in an almost religious manner. And, I'm not making a decision until I, read this chapter on what so-and-so says to do in this situation. And so I think that worship of celebrity, that worship of self-help gurus, all of that kind of combined into the story that emerged from Slade.
Awesome. Yeah. As somebody who writes about video games and talking about slaying zombies with mechanical dinosaurs, I'm familiar with occasionally dipping outside of what I'm familiar with. Believe it or not, that's not exactly a day-to-day experience for me. All right, going back to Elisa here. So you write a lot about, and obviously, especially with your speaking appearances, things that people can relate to. I know I found myself relating to a little bit with just grief and trauma, but you also have very unique moments that kind of are exclusive to you. Do you mind talking about why your story is unique compared to other people who've gone through a similar experience?
I think each one of us handles things differently. I think one of the things for me is that I do write memoirs. And so that's something that
I think that I am still here. I think we may have lost Elisa for a moment. Or Rob, are you still here?
I'll unmute. As far as I know, I'm still here.
Okay. Oh, Elisa is back. Elisa, go ahead. We got we heard barely just the first part.
Is how I disappear.
Yeah.
Randomly.
Believe me, I'm not going to dog you about internet issues today, by the way. So everybody who's listening to this right now, this is our second attempt at this because my internet kicked the bucket. So I appreciate you being patient. Go ahead though. What makes your story unique?
Oh, I think it's just my perpetual positivity. I just try to be positive and find the good. And then it's also worked out that I do write memoirs. And so I think I've been able to capture exactly what I'm feeling so that hopefully other people can see exactly what I'm going through, but then also find the good in situations if they're going through hard times. But Hody, I wanted to say something about Robb's book. So Slade is amazing. And I thought it was really interesting, all this stuff that's going on with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and how we are just fascinated with celebrities. But I think that was one of the cool things about Robb's book, is it was just so believable. You read it and then you end up just really kind of idolizing this Slade character, which I thought was really fun. But as I've been watching some of the Johnny Depp case, which I should not be watching, but hey, it takes my mind off of cancer. you know, but I just think it's kind of fun because it's a really good book, and especially for our society right now that is kind of enamored with these stars. And then just seeing how Robb was able to kind of capture that in a book and create this character, this fictitious character, who you can kind of see, well, gosh, this is why society is kind of, following these people's lives, and why we do that. Maybe we're just all trying to escape from our trials.
I I totally agree. I think one of the fascinating things about it, and I think the Johnny Depp Amber Heard kind of defamation trial is a really great example, because at the moment it might sound okay. Like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard relationship in the moment may have made sense. When we have the opportunity to remove ourselves, as Robb has as an interviewer, right, from the situation, and say, hey, read this on the trial, or read this on the stand, it sounds absurd, right? It sounds like nobody would ever go for this, right? But that's not, and I think that it's interesting to put yourself there, to kind of try to transport yourself to saying, what was going on that would make someone stick around when somebody is getting high, or pooping in your bed, or shattering things, or saying that they'll burn you alive? Like, these are things that actually happen in the trial, and you just say, how did you stay in this relationship? And Robb's book kind of has an interesting take on how that might come to be, or what certain characteristics might make someone do something that is kind of out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you guys see the interview with the guy who worked the front desk? And then he actually starts vaping and then drives off. And I thought, you know what? That's the guy I want to be. Like, I want to be the girl. I want to be the girl version of that guy. I'm not thinking, okay, but you guys know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that was my favorite witness.
Right?
Testifying in court, remotely from his phone, in his car, hitting the vape pen, and then just leaving.
Yeah, no.
He's like, this is not going to knock me off of my day. I still got to get groceries. So tell you what, Judge, I can pen you in for about 5 minutes, but that's all I'm going to do. Robb, do you have any response to that? And do you have any comments about Elisa's book?
Well, the celebrity thing, I hadn't even made the Johnny Depp, Amanda Heard connection, but you're right. It's like, there are just horrible things in the news going on all over the world, and everybody is tuned into this trial between two celebrities who, treated each other badly, and, who did it first and who did it worst. And I think there is some escapism to that. I mean, you can only read about, the real awful things going on in the world for so much of your day, and you need an escape. And I think that's part of it. And then we wind up putting them on a pedestal, but then we sure like knocking them down off those pedestals too. If they're up there for too long, we'd love to see the high and mighty fall. And so that's, I think, a part of it. On Elisa's book, I'd say, she had written all of these pieces as, blogs, social media posts, newspaper columns, where she's, worked for a newspaper and as a columnist for a newspaper, which makes it, near and dear to my heart, that from the newspaper business. And when she got a contract with Evolve Publishing to publish her memoir, which I'm with Evolve Publishing also, as my books are published through Evolve, and I'm also an editor with them. So I called texted the owner manager of Evolve Publishing and said, if you take her book on, I want to be the editor for it. because I'd read enough of her social media posts that I was familiar with it. And then she gave me all of these stories and said, how do we turn this into a book? And I read through them and I said, yeah, I think this is going to be the easiest editing job I've ever had in my life. Let's move a couple things around. Let's fix a comma. It's good. I mean, these had mostly been published already. And so, it was polished. It was just a matter of, how do you stitch together, all these different pieces that have been written over a couple of years. And like I said, that was one of the most pleasurable editing jobs. If anything can be pleasurable about the situation. But it was just so much fun to work with Elisa on, pulling it all together and, making it all into one single unified book. But yeah, that was easy. It was inspiring to read and heartbreaking and all of the things you would expect from the topic she covers.
Yeah, certainly. So with that in mind, Elisa, what do you want readers to kind of take away from your book from 2 years later?
I think really just that they're not alone, that all of us have hard times and we just have to strive to find the good and just kind of make it through the best that we can. And I've had a lot of people say, even my close friends, that they don't want to call me with the problems that they're facing because they feel like what I'm facing is so much worse. But I mean, my gosh, if somebody's having a hard time, they're having a hard time. I mean, you think about depression, for example. I mean, yes, they haven't had to say that they're terminally ill, but I mean, depression is a big deal. And so just to know that our feelings are valid and that everybody has hard times. I mean, despite how positive I can be, I mean, there are days that are really, really hard. So I hope that people will just understand that they can still get through no matter what they're facing. Like in my book, when I just randomly went skinny dipping, I think sometimes you just have to do things to pull yourself out of the moment just to make life good. We're only here for a certain amount of time, and my gosh, we better make the most of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I took away with the title even being 2 more years is it's like what you do when you have 2 more years left. And for me, I probably have like 30 more years left. But does the knowledge that I have 30 more years left hamper me in the sense that I am not filling every day with anything until it's too late, whereas this you gain this forced perspective. I think some days you wake up feeling, seizing the day. Some days you don't. But after reading, 2 more years, it's like, oh, I really need to be seizing more of these days that I'm missing. That there's kind of these moments that you just say, I need to be making as many of these moments as I can, as opposed to just being forgotten, to my own fault because I just didn't cram any intensity into any given day. Robb, so you've got a good short story collection coming up here called the Junebug Gothic. Now, do you mind telling me a little bit about the title and do the short stories have a theme, or are they just all short stories from you?
Yeah, our publisher, Evolve Publishing, decided they would like to collect some of my short stories that I've written over the last 10 years, I guess. The ones that are worth putting out there. Most of them have been published before in magazines or websites, maybe websites that nobody ever saw. Those sorts of things. So there's a few that I always thought were good enough to send out into the public, but never found a home for them. And a couple of new ones that wrote just for this. And so, pulled them all together into a collection. They're, as far as the genre or what style of writing, they're kind of all over the map. There's actually a genuine horror story in there, which may be the only one of those I've ever written. And there's others that are, kind of weird, but maybe not really horror stories. And then there's, sweet love stories and, everything from, there's the one where it's the couple meets at a speed dating and fall madly in love. And then there's, the story where they discover that, if you reattach the head, it really doesn't help solve the problem. So it's a real wide variety. But the running theme is, in general, because I'm from the South, I'm a small town Southern boy, the stories are mostly set in the South, or if they're not set in the South, they are characters who are from the South, who have gone somewhere else, for the most part. There's a few exceptions to it. So I've always kind of considered myself a Southern writer. The title, Junebug Gothic, Southern Gothic is a particular genre of Southern literature, kind of that Southern weird, which a lot of my stories probably fit into that. And Junebug, there's several stories reference Junebugs, the insect, because they're set in the South. So there's Junebugs everywhere. And then there's a character in one story. The story is titled Junebug, and that's the character's nickname. So it just kind of came up, all right, we'll call it Junebug Gothic. So I said they're written over several years. They're different styles, different genres, but they do have that, one underlying or undercurrent that they're all tied to the South in one way or another.
Awesome. Very appropriately titled. All right. So if you are listening to this, you have a chance here to ask a question of these authors here. They are published. They are bestsellers. They are doing well. They are headliners. If you have any questions for them, this is your chance. So I'm gonna give a couple more questions here before we wind it down. But if you had anything we didn't get to, listeners, please go ahead and let me know. All right, going back to you, Elisa. So let's talk about the future, which we all hope you have. Is your cancer in remission? What are your plans for as you've battled melanoma? Like, what's the perspective future look like so far? Are you making plans for the future? Are you letting the future come to you day by day? This question's gonna usually what's your plans in the future is a little less intense a question. For you, this is deeply intense. So what are you looking at doing in upcoming? What's on the horizon for you?
So I'm still battling cancer. It's just taking it a day at a time. The cancer in my back is getting a little bit worse. I just got news that the cancer that's in my thoracic spine, which is the upper portion, that's actually getting a little bit better, which is amazing. But right now, the doctor has just said, this is what I'll die from unless they find a miraculous cure. And if not, I'm just trying to make the best of the moments that I have. And so they've said that I could have up to 10 years. I mean, we just don't know. But I mean, the fact is nobody really knows how long they have anyways. I think so often about that man. I went to church and there was a guy behind me who, everybody was praying for me, and he came up and was so kind to me. And then he actually died in a freak accident that week. And it was just such a moment for me to just kind of come back to say, oh my gosh, none of us know how long we have. And I've told so many people. And, one of my cousins, I was talking with him about this, and he actually booked a trip to Italy. And he's young, he's in his 30s, but he's decided that he really wants to go to Italy, and he put things off. I put so much of my own life off, just thinking, oh, I'd wait to do this or this until my kids were grown up. And now that I'm finally to the point where my kids are starting to get a little bit older, my oldest is 20 and my youngest is 12. And we just don't know how long I have. So all of this putting things for later, waiting until tomorrow, it's like, no, I need to do things now. And I think that's something that all of us should really live by. So my plan for the future, I don't know. I might go skinny dipping again. If I can finally, walk better, I might go skydiving, because when you land, you have to be able to use your legs. But those are my plans.
Those are Honestly, we're just happy to have you for the day. I'm sorry about the news that you got. I got this question all in here, and I was like, I was half expecting a positive answer, but I mean, after reading the book, I kind of knew. You hope anyway. You hope against hope a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rob, what are things looking like on the horizon for you? What do you got going on?
Oh, got Queen Slade coming out last week and Junebug coming out next week. The next book on the horizon is Turning Trixie, and that will be out this fall, later this year, maybe October, November timeframe. And as we mentioned, I do editing of other writers, and I like to fish, and we live on a lake. So right now, that is my plans for the future is to relax, enjoy some time, and especially the family is all gathering this summer. So we're looking forward to that. But as Elise said, you try and take it one day at a time and make today something fun. Because whether you're old like me or have cancer like Elisa, or you're young and healthy like Odie, you never know what bus is going to run through the intersection and hit you tomorrow. Nobody is guaranteed another day. I think that's one of the biggest things that I took out of Lisa's book was nobody's guaranteed, another day.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, right now, if we're just living for today, you're both very successful. Slade is doing great. Everybody, please pick up a copy of that. And then you've got 2 more years. Again, that is Slade by Robb Grindstaff, and 2 more years by E.C. I keep calling you your regular first, E.C. Stilson. And you'll be able to find those. You won't have any problem looking them up and ordering them because they are all over the place. They are doing really well, both for very good reasons, both for very different reasons. I got to be honest, this is one of the most difficult interviews that I've done because both of you have such depth and such variety. There's a lot of different experiences going on. The books are obviously different. Your writing styles are obviously different, but that's the beauty of writing, is that everybody gets something out of it. There's something for everybody. It's like toppings on a pizza. Everybody's going to love something. It's just a matter of finding the something that's made for you.
As long as it's not pineapple.
Yeah.
Let's get that debate started, right?
No, that's not a debate. You are correct on that one. That's scientists are going to prove that pretty soon. That's just bad. Anna, here, my friend Anna says, please tell Rob I'm very much enjoying Slade so far. Was a big fan of his 2 previous books as well. So there you go. Got yourself a fan. You both got a bunch of compliments here. Elisa, yours beautiful on the inside as you are on the outside. That from Lou, as well as a bunch of others. Nobody said anything mean. That's good. I appreciate that. All right, Elisa, let's give you a final word on this one before I have each of you kind of say where to find you and what you're up to. Elisa, is there anything you want to tell audiences that read your book? Anything that you'd like to communicate with them, based on your experiences and what you have, with anything that you'd like to inspire them? Because not everybody has lost a kid. Most people haven't. Not everybody has been through terminal cancer, but you have. Is there any perspective that you would want to tell a normal loser like myself that kind of doesn't understand, anything that you would want them to know?
I think that a lot of times we set goals for, who we want to be tomorrow. And I think I just want to express how we need to decide who we want to be today. It can be so hard, whether we're facing, I don't know what it is, but hardship, addiction, just anything. Who do you want to be today? And who do you want to let know in your life who's important to you, who really matters, that you want to make sure that they know that you care about them. If you have anything in your life where maybe you're not getting along with someone, or you haven't been able to forgive somebody. I just think it's so important to just decide who you want to be today, so you can leave all that baggage behind and just be happy with your life. I mean, there were so many times where I took my health for granted. Maybe I'm watching Netflix or doing some stupid thing instead of being out hiking with my kids, or something like that. But I just it's hard because you can look back and regret these things. But I'm just really grateful that I didn't die in a car accident or something like that. And that now I can kind of live this way and say, hey, this is the person I want to be today. I want to make sure that my husband and my kids and my family, my friends, that they know how much I love them and how much they mean to me, so that from right now forward, I'm not making more regrets than I have to live with anyways.
Totally. I remember getting a good piece of advice. It says, we always put too much pressure on kind of loving somebody back, or redeeming somebody, or forgiving somebody, or thanking somebody. We're always say, well, we worry so much about the proportionality. And there's a lot of things. It's like, look, I'm never going to repay my mom. Like, that's it. It doesn't matter. But if I postpone thanking my mom for everything that she does and telling her that I love her until I feel I can do it proportionally, then I'll just never do it, And it's something that if you just say, hey, I just want you to know I love you for blank, I forgive you for blank, I want to thank you for blank, that's all you got to say. It could be a quick email, quick message. Tying up all your loose ends doesn't take all that long. It's just there's a lot that we kind of place on it. So I appreciate that perspective. All right. So I'm going to go back to Robb here. If I was a listener and I said, man, that Robb Grindstaff sounds like a really cool dude, and he's into some really cool literature, and I want to make sure I get on that train, what's the best thing to do? What's the best books to start with? How could a listener help you the best? Where do I follow you? Do I get you on social media? Do I buy all your books and obsess about them? What's the right thing to do?
Yeah, all of the above, right? So, one of the best things any reader can do for a writer that they enjoy is to leave a good positive review online. Amazon is the big gorilla, but you can also buy your books through Barnes and Noble and Apple iBooks and lots of other places. But wherever you buy your books, if you buy online, is leave a review for the authors that you like the best, and the books you like the best. Those book reviews on Amazon, for example, drive all the algorithms that I don't understand, that drive more readers to see your books. So if somebody saw this program today and decided, yeah, I'll check into that, I would start with Slade. It's going to be different and unusual, and then maybe drop back to Hannah's Voice, which was my first, not the first novel I ever wrote, but it was the first novel I had published, and it's quite different than Slade. Hannah's Voice is more of a standard narrative telling of a novel that you're familiar with. Carry Me Away came out just shortly after Hannah's Voice, and be watching for Junebug Gothic next week, and Turning Trixie this fall. You can, as far as where to find the books, again, any of the online retailers, if you go to Amazon, for example, and just search for my name, or you can go to robbgrindstaff.com, or you can go to our publisher's website, where you can find both Elisa and me, and that is Evolved Publishing, and that is evolvedpub.com. And they have lots of other books besides the two of us, but we don't care about any of those others. We only care about Elisa and me right now. So
you were the two that showed up. You got the top billing for me. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Robb, you clearly, I think with all of your literature, put a high value on readability and entertainment, and it's not a slog. A lot of times you pick up a book, and I love Atlas Shrugged, but there's times when I'm like, all right, I got to be ready. I got to, whereas Robb's got the kind of literature that gets you ready. So it's it's good stuff. Everybody, if you're listening to this, again, leave a good review if you've read his books. If you haven't, go pick up a copy of Slade. It is unlike anything you probably have read. I know it was like that for me, and I have read quite a bit. So go ahead and do that. Elisa, how do we follow you? How do we like you? I heard your stuff. I love it. And now what do I do with this new knowledge that I have found? This E.C. Stilson, who is just awesome. What do I do?
So my blog is ecwrites.net, and or you can just find me on Facebook just under EC Stilson. Yeah, and I think, you know, if you're looking for a more sobering experience to really make you realize to appreciate your life, I've written 2 More Years or The Golden Sky. And if somebody's looking for a read that's maybe a little bit more fun, this is a whole nother topic, but I was actually a homeless street musician in Hawaii when I was 17 years old. And so there's another book I've written is Homeless in Hawaii, and that one's a little bit more fun. But yeah, so that's where people can find me.
Yeah, so being homeless is more fun than getting cancer. So everybody make a note there. That's good knowledge for me. No, I appreciate that. You know, I really appreciate you bearing your soul in 2 More Years. It's obviously it is tough. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is something I've lived a very lucky, happy, privileged life. I have never known homelessness, and I have never known that kind of sickness, illness, loss. But there are certainly things that you will be able to relate to in this book. I know for me, you might not ever say, well, you might be like me, and well, you'd be like, this reader, I just feel bad. You know, this writer, I don't know what to do. But you kind of learn about what to do through some of the others. So even if it's not for your own grief, and there were moments that certainly helped with grief, even though it wasn't of that scale, there are moments that I was able to relate to in it. But to just say, hey, if I do know somebody's going through that kind of grief, what are the kinds of things that help? What are the kind of things that don't help? What's the kind of mindset that they're going through? So really just and also, like Robb's, very readable. You both don't lay out walls of text. Yours, EC, yours is very conversational. You know, it is peppered. You know, you don't get too many lines that are more than 3 long. And so this is a gripping narrative. It will hold your interest. Subject matter is obviously could not be more critical and important. We see a lot of what we're going through today, and some people are hurting out there, and these types of books and people who are willing to talk about it, it's really important to get into. So I want to thank you both, Robb Grindstaff, EC Stilson. Thank you so much for showing up today and being on the show. And for really organizing this whole thing. Listeners, if you have any questions for them, you know where to find them. Hit them up, get their novels, leave some good reviews. And everybody, just have an excellent day. Thank you so much, and we will see you later.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks so much, Odie.